And finally, my partner said to me, people don't wake up screaming from nightmares 3 times a week. You need help. What I learned in psychoanalysis changed my life. I want to say it gave me my life because I wasn't really even living my full life. I thought, oh, this is the way happy people live. How great. I wish I had known earlier, but I'll take what I can get.
Hi and welcome to Lead Well.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Lead Well podcast. And today's guest is someone who's done something both rare and brave. Have you ever wondered what really happens in a psychoanalyst's office? The silences, the dreams, the unexpected breakthroughs. My guest, Joan K. has lived it and written about it in her memoir, Untangling. In it, she takes us along on two life-changing journeys, first in her 20s and then in her 60s as she faces old fears, unravels the quiet traumas of childhood, and finds freedom on the other side. Joan, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Lead Well.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very glad to be here too.
Thank you. So, Joan, I think the natural question really is, why did you start psychoanalysis and why did you decide to share such an experience, which is so personal, intensely personal and private in a memoir?
I'll begin by answering the second question, which really is what I learned in psychoanalysis changed my life. I want to say it gave me my life because I wasn't really even living my full life. And I have such a profound appreciation for what I learned. And it taught me a way of thinking that I felt people, even who are not going through psychoanalysis, can use in their own lives to reach a much more aware level of what's going on with them. Especially young people in their 20s are so kind of at a loss for who they are and what they want. Often they'll grab onto one thing. I'm going to be a doctor. But of course, there's the rest of your entire personality. And in my case, and I think in everybody's case, we're moved along by our psyches. And psychoanalysis is sort of like giving you an owner's manual for your psyche. And for me, the difference between what I understood about myself and what my psyche was telling me was very, very different.
Wow.
So I was 19, 20 when I was at a very prestigious university, giving my all to my work and doing very well. But suddenly I began to kind of fall apart. I was crying all the time. I'm not a crier. I never did this. Something was coming up from deep inside me. And in my 20s, I was always able to suppress it, get it go away, and concentrate on my work. But my reality was I was terribly lonely. I didn't have boyfriends. I didn't know how to make friends. And that was really forming me. And I didn't know why. I could see other people were naturally falling into friendships and lovers and all of that. And I really didn't understand who I was, what was happening to me. And finally, in my late 20s, I didn't even realize something that my then partner was able to say to me, which was I was waking in the middle of the night with nightmares that had me scream. And finally, my partner said to me, people don't wake up screaming from nightmares 3 times a week. You need help. And so all of these were signals from my psyche that it was trying to tell me something. It was actually forming a life that was not the life I wanted to live. One of loneliness, fear that I would lose my partner, fear that I would lose my friends or I couldn't make friends. So I didn't even see this. I think this is where everybody comes in. This is something you can do something about. You can investigate what these signals mean and recognize that you are being driven in a way by forces from inside you, that no matter how you want to become a CEO of a company, or in my case, a professor, even though you can do that, there's another part of you that's not doing well. And you kind of just create defense systems. I'm not going to look at that. That's not important. It doesn't matter to me. In college, I used to say to myself, I don't even need friends. I don't need boyfriends. I'm here to study. So we tell ourselves stories. But in order to really flourish in your life, and your life is more than just your work, but it also influences your work and how you are in your work with people, with your profession. So I think that what I'm offering and what I learned was what the psyche is trying to tell you, why it's so important to look at it. That no matter how much you try and control these various issues that come up, they are going to stay with you and create anxiety and create tensions, unhappiness, suffering, really, that you can avoid with, I think, psychoanalytic thinking. And so that's really why I wrote the book, to share what I learned and also to encourage people to think about whether their signals are so strong that they need something more. They need a guide in the form of a psychoanalyst. There are different degrees of suffering, as it were. And maybe you just have just some recognition, some understanding to make your life fuller and better. For other people, and this is why I named my book Untangling, for other people, it's so tangled there inside you that you really need help in sorting it out. And I did. I was having a recurrent nightmare, different, really, just the same thing. People trying to kill me, and they would inject me with some drug that would take my strength away, so I couldn't fight people who were trying to kill me. And I would wake up screaming because, of course, I was going to be killed. But I was 27 years old, and it never struck me that this is something I needed help with. And I think so many people are in the same position. They don't recognize something is terribly twisted and tangled up inside them. I just had no information about such things. I didn't come from a background where people had therapy or doctors for your sadness or your upsets. So it wasn't really available to me as an idea that you get help with that. I was really brought up, as many people are, where you're fiercely independent, take care of your own problems, you solve your problems and carry it. I think that works to a certain extent, but not really very well, because your heart and your soul are not with you. They're trying to tell you, please look at me. Something is wrong here. My partner pushed me to get help. I went to get help. I thought it was just a therapist, but it turned out that she was just getting her degree, her certificate in psychoanalysis. So she recorded our sessions and had the help of her supervisor to help me. And I thought that was great because it meant I was getting help from two people. And it also meant I only paid $25 a session because she was brand new and needed practice. And there, in every institute of the psychoanalysis, there are people who are learning, and you can get help there, often at a price you can afford. And so that's how I got help in my 20s. And what knocked my socks off was that this psychoanalyst, in a matter of about 6 months, convinced me to, first of all, she started asking me about my childhood, and I really couldn't tell her anything because I didn't know anything. I knew that I had a father who died when I was 2. And that my mother remarried when I was 5, and we moved to a new apartment. I knew nothing about what happened before that. When in the new life, that's when I started to really remember. But she sent me into my family to interview them and to find out what our life was in this early period. And that's, of course, when I discovered not only how traumatic our family life was. Our father died. My mother had no money. She had 2 babies. She was 26 years old. I was 2. My brother was 7. She had to go 1 week after his funeral to work full time again and leave us with their very inadequate babysitters, that she could afford. She had so little money. And she didn't have a family that helped. I would learn about how problematic the family was. But what she lit on in my telling her the information that I learned was that as my father we lived in a very small apartment, 3 rooms, and my father was in the bedroom dying of cancer, and my mother would give him morphine injections all throughout the day. Exactly. Now, it meant nothing to me. I'm reporting this to my analyst. And finally, she says, the injections, Joan, the injections. And that was a eureka moment where I wouldn't have even known it happened. But my mother had told me this. And then she became like a director. Where were you sitting? Where was your high chair? And she convinced me that I would have seen my mother preparing the needles. And I asked my mother, and my mother said, yes, but you didn't know anything. You were 2 years old. You were a baby. You didn't know anything. Well, it turns out, and this is such an important message for people, little babies, children, they do know. They see what they see. They may not understand what it means, but they know it's happening. And that goes into your memory, into your psyche. Those needles stayed with me. I was 27 and still dreaming about them. So she tried to explain to me what a 2-year-old would think about such a thing. And she suggested that one of the questions I had is, why am I dreaming this? Nobody ever tried to kill me. I never had any experience like this. And finally, she said, little children, it's like fairy tales. They're very simple, very black and white. You saw your mother giving needles to your father who was wasting away, who died and disappeared. You thought she might do the same to you. And so inside my psyche was a story of incredible fear that this person I needed, who I thought loved me, also had maybe the capacity to kill me. And on some level, I was terrified and waking up screaming at night. That is the moment when I said, and this is, I think, something very typical, that doesn't make any sense, I said. My mother loved me. And I just dismissed what she said. Well, right after that, my dreams stopped. I didn't have nightmares anymore. And that was when I discovered my psyche. That was when I really understood that you're carrying around with you these traumas, even these discomforts. They don't have to be colossal traumas. In my case, nobody hit me, nobody hurt me, nobody starved me. But I observed something that frightened me to my very soul. this was my moment where I discovered what was motivating me, what was making me who I was.
Mhm.
Why was I so frightened in the night? And I think that was a very dramatic discovery, but every little discovery was just as precious. It gave me a sense of what formed who I was. I began to feel like I knew myself as opposed to the mystery of me. Why was I so lonely? Why was I so frightened? Why did I have nightmares? Who am I? And once you at least know, no matter what really did happen, as in my case, that's so terrible. Handle it if you know it. You can begin to process it and understand that that's a part of you, that's your past. Happen, and you can feel compassion for yourself and for your mother and the situation, so on and so forth. I even understood why she never mentioned it again. In the time when my mother was a young mother, she was very young, she was 26 years old, how people dealt with, they thought if you just didn't talk about something, it didn't happen and the children wouldn't be affected. And I
Yeah.
think it was typical, right?
Yeah. I think people also, I mean, at least at that time, they didn't even know that the first 5 years, even if children do not remember, as you said, they observe, they see things and they do change. So question I have to you, how has this psychoanalysis, this experience then changed your relationship with other people?
Well, I mean, it's a long process. And as I began to really understand my past, and I have to admit, the first psychoanalysis gave me the confidence and the sense of myself. I wasn't separate from myself anymore. I knew what I valued, who I was. I knew my family. I knew who they were because they were a big secret in my life. Family that was my biological father's family. All of these mysteries that were very unsettling, actually, in my heart and soul. Although I didn't know it, I had never even heard of them really. I think it just gave me a foundation. So I formed a relationship towards the end. I formed a relationship with the man who became my husband, still is. I was able to create a family and had friendships that were steady and reliable. I don't think I could have done that before. I was a lone wolf, but I didn't even know that. So once I knew what was going on inside of me, once I untangled, to again use the title I used in my book, it really felt like inside me was untangling. And so I could just be more comfortably in the world. And once you're a little comfortable in the world, you can connect with people. I was able to enjoy my life, but something was still terribly deep down unresolved.
Okay.
And I only knew that because we now moved to the other end of my life where I'm looking at retirement. Now, meanwhile, I really did have a beautiful life. I always felt somewhat apart from it. I couldn't fully live it. It was everything I wanted, a family, a wonderful job. I loved teaching. I loved college, kids, but there was something that wasn't fully worked out. And I still felt frightened that the next moment would take me back into this colossal loneliness I felt as a young person. And that I would be isolated and I would lose that. So very catastrophic thinking. And I knew from my experience in psychoanalysis that my psyche was giving me a message. And I thought, I was very, very scared to retire because I felt if I wasn't Professor Peters, I wouldn't exist. Who would I be? And that was really a message to me that I needed some help. So I thought I was just going to therapy to help me face my retirement and investigate why it was pregnant. And that just led me down deep back into my psyche. And in this psychoanalysis, which is already a very different enterprise because the techniques have changed, it's called relational analysis. And the idea is that your relationship with the analyst contains really your entire emotional history. And what you're dealing with really is much, much more subtle. It's how do I relate to other people? What do I project? How do my fears manifest in my reactions to this person? And those techniques took me deeper. It was about learning about my history, learning what happened, putting together an idea of what formed my fears. This was reliving those fears. And it was really an altered state. It took me, they call it regression, where you go back down into your childhood. You don't even know it's happened, but you're feeling it. And it's almost overwhelming. But you have this wonderful guide who's there with you and who can interpret your feelings, give them to you in a way that makes sense. And you realize you haven't made sense of it before. You haven't really understood the driving forces in your life. You can see the things that are wrong. So, for example, in my life, knowing that loneliness and fear really in a very reasonable way, because my father died, he disappeared. Nobody even told me he died. He just disappeared. And my mother, she was mourning. She was grieving. She wasn't really available. And fortunately, I had a very loving brother. But he was a little boy too. You know, he could only be with me so much. So this loneliness, this fear, how it came out in my life, throughout my life, was a fear that if my friend didn't call me back soon enough, that I lost them. So I was always anxious. Maybe I wasn't going to say the right thing or do the right thing. My friend would leave. I did not have that fear with my husband. And I think the confidence I felt in my brother's love gave me a kind of normal hill that I could bring into a romantic relationship, but not so much with friends and with the feeling of belonging in the world. And I think the feeling of belonging is so fundamental and so important. And for many people, they call it attachment problems. For many, many people, the sense of belonging is fractured or impaired. And it has to be understood and repaired, as it were, in order to feel at complete ease in the world. And that's what the second psychoanalysis. Just like suddenly here I had this life that I loved, and I wasn't afraid to live it. I was just in it. It was a new experience for me to live without high anxiety. I thought, oh, this is the way happy people live. How great. I wish I had known earlier, but I'll take what I can get. I have it now. I think it's just you're much freer to pursue whatever it is you want to pursue. You know, I could have continued teaching, and I really didn't. I felt like I had completed that. And I was ready for something big. And my analyst herself said to me, I was emailing her a lot because for me, what happens in the psyche came out in the middle of the night. I would have very vivid dreams, other kinds of nightmares. I would have panicking. I would wake up, and that's what she could use to understand what was going on. So she had me write when it was happening in the night. And I was writing a lot, and I'm a good writer. And she finally at one point said, you ever thought about writing about psychoanalysis? Because nobody really had done that from a patient point of view. The early years of psychoanalysis, there were a few, really a handful, maybe 5, and then nothing. She wrote an afterword to my book saying that what I wrote was as accurate picture of what psychoanalysis is, what goes on in the consulting room as it exists. And that was the deepest compliment. And what satisfied me so much is that I think it's a very dark mystery what goes on in the consulting room. Nobody knows. And my feeling is, what are we hiding? Whatever came up for me is just human. And our fundamental needs and fears are the same. Yours, mine, the man next door, everybody. They're the same. We need to feel responded to. We need to feel welcomed into the world. We need to feel connected. We need to feel that we're worthy and okay, all of the same things. And I was certainly, all those frailties came up in me, felt like, what do I have to lose? If I were teaching at a university, I wouldn't be able to write this book because it's too private for my students, for my colleagues. I'm in a professional relationship with them, and I need to maintain at the distance that's appropriate. But I was retired. Well, there I was. I didn't have any obligation to be so private. And I felt it as a responsibility. I have a gift of writing, and I am in a position of freedom where I can do this for people. I can share what I learned. And I really don't care if people know that deep inside I was afraid I would be lonely. Deep down inside, I had a tremendous dependency, that something I had to work through and overcome. But that was there because I really, as a child, had much too young. I just didn't have the kind of parental involvement that most people. So, sure. But what does that say? Does that make me a bad person? No, of course not. It makes me human.
Yeah, exactly. It makes you a person. It makes you a human being.
Right. And that gives permission to other people not to disparage themselves for having those very basic human needs and responses. And if you can think cycle, let's say you have some altercation with a colleague or a friend or your partner, instead of going through all your evidence for why that person is terrible, which is what we do. We marshal, immediately the lawyer shows up in our brain and the lawyer argues your case. And instead of doing that, if we turn our attention into ourselves, stay with the emotion, go down as deep as you can, and really try to remember when you first felt that very feeling. That's the sort of thing that, believe it or not, if you stay with it, if you can really face it, you can uncover what it is that originally created the situation that made you paranoid with people, excessively needy with people. See it for what it is, a feeling that's in you. And you have a whole different relationship to that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a kind of concentration, I think, and a willingness to use that tool, which is the primary psychoanalytic tool, to go down into the feeling and really investigate it.
Mm.
Right now, I'm doing a blog for Psychology Today, and this month, I'm writing about phobias, little phobias, big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Not fear of flying in a plane or germs, but little tiny phobias that we might. And to really continue what I've been saying, it occurred to me not too long ago, even, that I had a phobia about having a bed unmade. My bed, the beds in my house have to be made in the bed. And that's such a silly thing. I didn't even need to think about it. I just made the bed. Well, that's a nice thing to make your bed in the morning, be tidy. But really, I had a phobic reaction on beds. And when I started to really think about it, I realized it wasn't just I didn't like the look of an unmade bed because I'm a clean freak. I'm not. It was something, it almost sent chills up, like a cold dread, like something. If I let myself think about it, which I didn't usually, I just made the bed and got out of there. But if I had to think about it, if I allowed myself about it, I could feel it in my body. I could feel almost a sick feeling in my stomach. And I really had to think about it. Why and it really took me down to a child. And I remember feeling that, not about the bed when I was a small child, because of course I couldn't make my own bed as a very little one. But I remembered the feeling. And finally, I put two and two together and realized I was watching my father die in a bed that was unmade. And he was in it in the daytime.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the connection, that the dread I was feeling in my body was seeing this man who was my daddy waste away. He weighed 70 pounds at the end of his life. He was a big man. And he was disappearing. And somehow the symbol of that was the unmade bed. So those feelings got attached to the bed. Something concrete, which is very often the case. People have these tiny little insignificant phobias.
Yeah.
And,
And habits as well, too.
Yes. That don't really make any sense for us. Right.
But they do if you start to dig deeper.
Yes. Start to dig. You have the phrase. That's exactly. Start to dig and see what you find. And I think that's the exercise. That's this. It's hard. I mean, that feeling, I didn't want to sit with that feeling in my body. I had to leave, in order to really feel it, I had to leave the bed unmade. Now first, and really let myself feel it and wonder, what is this? Why would this feeling come up for me? And then you have to look at just how traumatized you were by something. You want to think of yourself as an adult, you're fine. And then you have to go back and recognize you were a very frightened child.
And I mean, yeah. And what I only realized a few years ago is that this child that I once was is still me. I mean, I have evolved into the woman I am now. The child hasn't gone away. She's still with me.
That's right. And if she is still super frightened, or if she is still angry, or whatever, that's going to be in you. So if you don't go back there to sort of get her, reconcile with her and what happened to her, and then bring her back into your life with understanding, she's still going to be in charge. Often I felt like the 3-year-old me was making the choices and having the
Absolutely.
reactions.
Especially in the harder situations, in the difficult situations,
That's
when we are under stress, that's when
yes,
those little children take over.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So, we live in a kind of balance with
Mm.
the child inside.
With every single age we once were, I think it's like we are this entity of all the different ages that we have gone through.
That's so true. We're always, that 20-year-old facing the unknown. And how do we possibly find a place there?
Yeah.
We're always that person. We're always, whatever it is, 30-year-old with a brand new baby thinking, oh my God, what is life going to be like now? We're always in those dramatic
Yes.
transitional moments and who we were. Yeah, that's true.
Well, well, Joanne, I could listen to you forever, but I want to honor your time. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your experience. It was
Thank you so much
wonderful.
for this conversation. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
And I had so many questions, but you answered them all without me asking them.
Well, you make it very easy. I thank you for that.
Thank you. And I know I definitely will link your book, Untangling. I will share that. And I will definitely also look into it because I kindly received a copy. So I will definitely read it with a lot of interest.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
I'd love to hear from you when you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This was Lead Well. Now, what is the one thing that you're taking away from this episode? Please share in the comments below and do share the podcast with your friends and family, but only if you like it.